Guys, the property owners of this property have had a guts full of this screen. You've probably seen these type of screens before. The problem with this one is because it goes around an old window, there's tons of gaps coming in behind, lots of rooms for the flies to come in and out, and it positively looks ugly. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the screen off and we're going to put in a new retractable Monarch EX screen. Alright, so our first step is going to be to measure so that we can order the right screen. So with this type of door, what we're going to need to do is remove these old angled cover trims, and then we're going to fit the new build-out frame inside these 3 pieces of cover trim. So what we need to do is we need to measure from the mullion right through to the edge, to the front edge of that angled trim. In this case, it's 870 millimeters wide. And what we're going to do in the width, we're going to take off 15 mils. So we're looking for a measurement of 855 is going to be the measurement for ordering our screen. Now the height from the bottom of this point to the top here is 1960. And in this case, we're going to take off 30 mils for the height. So we're wanting a screen that is 1930. The reason? Because we're going to have the build-out frame top and bottom. And the build-out frame is 12.5 mils, but I allow 15 mils. One, because it's easier for my maths. So I can say less 30 for the overall height and less 15 for the width, because I'm only taking off the one side because it's going to build straight on to the interlocker. So in this case, we're looking for a screen 1930 by 855. All right, now we've come to the installation bit. So we've taken out our beads. What you can do when you take out the cover trim beads is you can use this bead as a template for your build-out frame. So remembering, along the bottom, on the build-out frame we have a corner jointer. So we take this size here and all we have to do is take off 25 mils, which is the width of this corner jointer when it joins into the build-out frame. I normally take an extra couple of mils off. So in this case, here's the build-out frame. I've taken 27 millimeters off that size so that when I put in the build-out corner into here, you'll see it's the same size. So we do that along the bottom, take off 27 mils, but for the jamb side, because it's got 2 corner jointers, we're going to need to double that. So we take off 55 millimeters, 27 and 27's 54. I add another couple of mils, so we'll make it 27 millimeters. So with the build-out frame, you can either screw it in. In this case, I'm going to tape it in because I've got a nice clean surface to work with, and you'll see that I've put the blue mounting tape along the head and the jamb, and I've got a special 25 mil tape for the bottom, which is a bit heavier just because it's obviously the bottom of the door that's likely to be kicked, so that's where it's going to need to be strongest. And you can see I've just peeled the tape back a little bit, which makes it easier for me when I put the build-out frame in to peel the tape back. So we've got our build-out frame here. I'll just connect up the top piece and we should be able to drop this in perfectly and it should fit nicely into place. Now, one of the things you'll notice is with the build-out frame, I've got the angled piece on the top and the jamb facing inward. But on the bottom, I've flipped it up the other way so it faces down. So on the bottom of the sill, I'm not going to have anything sticking up. So we've got that all in place now. We'll now peel this back. you see that is as solid as. So now we've got our frame which we can put our screen in. Tidy kiwi. Okay, so the first section we're going to put in is the head section of the screen. When you order these screens to size, they do come with a mounting tape on them, but I've used a cut down screen from stock, so they don't have any mounting. So I'm just going to screw fix this one in place. So this is where the head sits. You can see it's nice and tight in there. There you go. That's how that's going to sit. And what I'm going to use in there is I'm going to be using just standard 14mm Tech screws. So protect the ears. So again, in this case, this head section wasn't pre-drilled, so that's why I used the Tech screws and I drilled it at the same time. The next thing is the plastic cover piece. And this piece just mounts up into the head by putting it in, so that this rounded pit sits at the top, and you just roll that nicely into place, and that just floats up in there. Our next section is the cartridge end. So the cartridge end slides in from, I put it in from the bottom on an angle, put it along the top. And again, we just have to keep it parallel as we go down the jam side here. And again, all we need to do is put a couple of Tech screws in that to hold that in place. In this case, the cartridge housing does have holes pre-drilled, so you can line those holes up with your Tech screws. So I've got a nice parallel finish running down there. So just clean up the little bit of swarf on the bottom. So I've got a nice clean surface now on which to mount the track. I tend to give it a little bit of a wipe with this solvent cleaner here, which is very good for powder coating. Dries very quickly. That'll make sure your track's going to get a good adhesion. So the next thing is your track. As you see, you've got a slotted end for your track. This is going to be the end which goes into the housing section for the cartridge. I peel a little bit of the tape off. And again, you can measure this, but really your iometer is pretty good. So inside the center of this housing there is a die line. You're wanting to match the middle of the die line that's on this track to line up with that housing. And you normally leave a couple of mils, 2 or 3 mils from the end of that. In this case I'm quite tight with my cartridge, so I've got it right at the back. See how that's nice and parallel? So I just tape out, make sure it's on, and that's not going anywhere. So the next part of the process is now the good bit. We get to the screen. So again, in this case, you'll see that the screen I've used to cut down was a 2100 by 900 screen. So we've now made this only 1950 by 850, so it's quite a bit smaller. I've taken about 150 mils off the height of this screen. Just free up the strings. Now what I do with these is just make sure the strings aren't knotted at the top. So there's normally 2 sets of strings come in. I put my finger through the middle of those 2 sets and just make sure it's nice and free, so there's no tangling there. I just push it gently into the bottom and into the top, and I'll just sit that there. I'm not going to push it right in, I'm just going to sit that in place. And you'll see that the strings are nicely there ready to go into the catch frame. So now we've got the catch frame here, which I've just cut, and it's still got a lot of swarf on it. So the receiver for the strings, I click that in place first. Again, making sure my strings aren't tangled, and then I just sit that. Normally the way I do this is just bend it a little bit at the top, and that should sit nicely in place there. So again, you can see that you just need to put this in parallel so we get it lined up. Nice and parallel with the bottom of the track, and we'll just screw this in place with our 14mm Tech screws. Again, just a little vacuum of the swarf. And this is now where I click my cartridge into place. So what I normally do is I put my foot into the bottom, and I push bottom first, and then I push it all the way in until you get like a seat belt where you get that nice click going along, and that's now in place. Now you see that I've got a lot of strings hanging down here. Now that's because I've cut 150 mils off the screen. So before I use the screen, I just, whilst it's in place, will take up the tension of that by loosening this, giving it a reasonable bit of tension. Now we've got a screen that we can test. So then it's just a matter of putting on the handle. Normally what I would do is I'd give this a quick sort of line up and make sure it's all sort of square, remembering that once you put the handle on, you're going to increase the tension a bit in the center anyway. So that looks pretty good. We can do some final adjustments if it's not. So then we just put the handle on. So the way we put the handle on is to make sure that your magnets are opposing. So the die lines on the magnet are opposing each other. So that way the polarity will magnetize properly. So you put the handle in at the bottom, line it up at the top, just down a fraction, grab my fingers into the mesh behind it and click it all the way down. And close it up, just raise that up to the end stop, stops the cartridge coming out. And that's a perfect screen. Nicely tucked away.